The effects on the mind are explosively disruptive.
Okay, check 1, 2, 3. We're on. We are on. Very exciting news, guys. Kamala Harris is trying to elicit support from Florida's Haitian community. In fact, she's even promised everyone who votes will receive a very delicious golden retriever. Hi, I'm Kenny Webster. Thanks so much for turning your radio on. It's great to be here with you guys. I am live in studio right now with a good friend of mine, Christian Collins from the Texas Youth Summit, my brother from another. Let's get this microphone in front of you right there. How's that? What's up with you, my man? How you been? Where you been, bro?
Well, Kenny, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for all that you do. It's great to have you at the Texas Youth Summit, and doing well. Excited to be here.
I assume most of our listeners and viewers, we're live streaming on social media right now as well as being on the radio, and I think a lot of people know you, but to those people that live outside of Southeast Texas, you're a millennial. You're right in the middle of the millennial years. Right? You're in your 30s, and you are a conservative, a Christian. You were part of the Tea Party movement as a young man. Now you're part of the America First movement. And you put together this humongous thing called the Texas Youth Summit that has now been around for 4 years. Don Jr., Matt Gaetz, Wesley Hunt, Lauren Boebert. You get college kids and you red pill them. You gather them together, and it's a wholesome thing. And you basically explain to them corporate America, academia, Hollywood, the media are lying to you. Here's what the truth is, and you've changed thousands of people's lives and probably helped at least a few good candidates find staff members. That's a pretty awesome thing to do, right?
Well, it's been so much fun to get to do it. We started it in 2019, and it's grown every single year, and I consider it the favor of God, because I'm who am I to just have all these amazing people that have just wanted to support this movement, whether they're speaking, whether people are donating, all the kids that have wanted to come. And I definitely consider it the favor of God, and there's no other way to describe it. He uses our gifts and our ability to network, and it's been so much fun. I'm a college teacher, and so I've been teaching college for over a decade, and I've seen firsthand, having been a former college student at the University of Texas and beforehand, how difficult it is for college students who lose their way. And in my case, I was a pastor's kid, and though my dad was a pastor, I fell away from God, one. Two, I thought I was a liberal Democrat for a while, and I was going to vote for Barack Obama because I liked the idea of a black president. But thankfully, my dad turned me onto the Rush Limbaugh show, and I got connected to conservative politics. And, so I went off to college. I was debating for college Republicans. I was very active in politics. And but this is after, my teachers had showed us Michael Moore videos. And, they basically.
Me too, yeah.
I mean, I was going way off.
Right.
I was going way off the rails. And so thinking, climate change and gun control are my top issues. And, so then I veered back to the right because of Rush Limbaugh. I was debating for college Republicans, but, I was conservative. But, on the other hand, I wasn't living for God, and my heart was away from God. And it was one summer before my senior year of college, I turned my life over to God. It was reading Lee Strobel's book.
How old were you?
I was 21 years old.
Okay. So this is still pretty early in your adult life.
Yeah. So I was reading Lee Strobel's book, A Case for Christ, the apologetics for why the gospel is true. And there's all this corroborating evidence for why the gospel is true. And that really turned me on to God. And that engaged my mind, but it was as having an experience with God at a church that changed my heart. And so I turned my life over to God, but then I was like, okay, I'm not doing politics anymore. I only want to do faith, based stuff. I want to maybe go to seminary like my dad, who was a pastor. And my dad encouraged me to continue down the path that I'd been on. Again, I was getting a government degree, and, so I went on to get my master's. I didn't go to seminary at that time. And, I ended up, through a couple of different experiences, working with Senator Ted Cruz and traveling with his father, the Reverend Raphael Cruz. That's where I connected really my faith and my politics. And if you don't know Raphael Cruz, at the time he was 76 years old, and now he's about 83. He is so gung-ho for this country. He told Ted...
I think a lot of people might know his son is a little more famous than... Who's his son?
Senator Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And but we've hung out with Raphael Cruz. In fact, we did a rally when Wesley Hunt was up for re-election. Raphael Cruz, a great speaker, and he spoke at the Texas Youth Summit. You talk to college kids a lot, but you're also a college professor. They say those that don't do teach, but you do, and you teach. So you do both of the things, right? You run an event, you organize events, you've ran for office before, you're an activist, you're an author, you're on social media. What do you teach college kids?
Well, we teach them Judeo-Christian values and conservative values, and that's why I do the Texas Youth Summit, is to instill those right values in them so that they know why they believe what they believe. And Scripture talks about if your house is built on the sand, you'll be swept away. But if you're built on the firm foundation, the rock, you'll have the right perspective. You'll be safe, right? And so when it comes to worldview, it really matters. In every area of society, we have to have the right worldview. Whether you're a radio host or you're an activist like I am, or if you're But outside of politics, if you're in law enforcement, if you're a teacher, if you're a firefighter, whatever, worldview matters because you can impact so many people. So we want them to have the right worldview when they're in high school and college, when you have, liberal teachers in your public school system. The books in the libraries are crazy. When you're going off to college and they're trying to show you all these different videos and turn you into a rabid America-hating atheist, that's what the problem is. And so we want to make sure that they have the right values so that they're set up for life and they're good citizens of this country. So it's a lot of fun to get to do it. And I'm just so honored that you've been a part of it. And, we bring in like these big names, like you said, and we're going to continue to do it. It gets bigger every year. This year we had the pyrotechnics and all the fun stuff and, great hotel experience and so many good sponsors. We had a great time.
And not unlike, I don't know how many people saw this viral video of Jerry Seinfeld last weekend. He was in Australia. Anti-Israel activists following him around. They go around to his comedy shows. Nothing says funny like Islamic extremism, and that's what they're advocating for in the audience of the Jerry Seinfeld show. At the last Texas Youth Summit, wasn't there like a Trans for Palestine person that showed up to harass Matt Gaetz? And he says this person, kind of like Jerry Seinfeld, the person follows him everywhere.
Yeah, he has this troll person that, just unfortunately got through and, tried to bum rush the stage. And, he's this really overweight.
Everybody was safe. It wasn't like
he's this really overweight trans guy, and everybody was safe. And Matt, he never blinked. I mean, he just kind of looked at the guy, and as he was being rushed off the stage by security, Matt just goes, "Was that Liz Cheney?" And the whole room just, it was an unfortunate moment for me because I was just sitting in the crowd at the time, and I was just like, "Well, would you look at that?" Then it dawned on me, okay, this is my event. We got to stop this, but Matt was just so calm, cool, and collected. He's like, "Yeah, that guy follows me around everywhere.
But kind of like Matt, the bigger your event gets. Every year your event's grown. It was a few hundred people, and now it's a few thousand. You did that in a few years.
Yeah.
There's going to be more people that want to tear you. Demons are real, dude. I mean, I'm not, this isn't like mojo witchcraft talk or anything. I think demonic people are real.
100%.
Evil is real.
Yeah.
Curses are real. And when you're doing something like what you guys do, teaching people about American values and Christianity, people are going to come for you, Christian.
We're fighting the culture war. And Andrew Breitbart said politics streams down from culture.
One of my heroes.
But beyond that, the underlying thing that we all understand, you and I both understand this, is it's beyond politics and beyond the culture. There is spiritual warfare going on, and the Scripture talks about how we're fighting things beyond just what you see. It's the things that you don't see, and so it's important that we see it through that lens, and we realize that the trans movement, especially what they've tried to do to young children and groom them from an early age, it's demonic.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned Ted Cruz and the transgenderism. It's unfortunately, there's way too many news stories about girls having to compete against fully grown men. But this was a topic of discussion last night between Senator Ted Cruz and a guy I affectionately refer to as Concussion Beto, which would be Colin Alid, was an NFL player. It's not a fair match. You have the guy that's considered to be the greatest living member of the Harvard Debate Club, right? Alan Dershowitz says nobody's better at debating than Ted Cruz, right?
True.
Whether you're liberal or conservative, if you're a member of the Harvard Debate Club, Ted Cruz is really good. And last night he had a debate with Colin Alid. And one of the topics that was discussed was whether or not boys should be able to compete against girls in sports. And that is when this was what was said.
He said not a word about his own record. I have to admit, the beginning of it reminded me of Kamala Harris in her debates answering everything. Look, I was born in the middle class. It's some lines that sound nice that ignore his record. Let's just talk about his voting record. Again, you can go to allredfacts.com. You can see the actual votes. 4 times he has come out for men playing in women's sports, for boys playing in girls' sports. He is a co-sponsor, and he voted for a law called the Equality Act. The Equality Act mandated that boys be able to go in girls' bathrooms, in their locker rooms, and their changing rooms. He voted for it. That is his record. Number 2, there was a bill. It was a very...
Hold on. I got to pause it right here. You get what do you see what Colin just did? Shook his head. That's not true. That's not true. It's objectively true. This isn't like we're saying your opinion is this. You either did or didn't vote for it, and we've got a record of it. There's a website, like Ted Cruz just explained. Politicians, Democrats, will lie about anything. You can't lie about what you did or didn't vote on. There's a record of it. Yet Colin Alrid's doing it on live TV, and I can't help but notice the Texas Tribune's not fact-checking him on that. KPRC Houston, not us, the radio station, but the local NBC affiliate, also not fact-checking him on this. Why do they get away with this, Christian?
Well, look, I mean, they don't care to know the truth, and they don't want to point out anything that Democrats ever do wrong, because the Democrats on the mainstream media, they are one and the same. And as it relates to Colin Alid, Riley Gaines came out last night, and she said, this is not up for debate. You voted with all the Democrats against keeping men out of women's sports. You did that. And there was a bill, and they made sure that they all voted in unison against that.
Do you believe these polls that claim that Ted Cruz might lose to Concussion Beto, to Concussion Wendy Davis? I'm just not buying it.
Well, I sure hope he doesn't lose. But I look, Ted always said you run 2 ways if you're running for office, scared or unopposed. And so, look, the polling is very close, and they recognize that. And Ted's being outspent just like he was being outspent in 2018. Because Ted Cruz is such a stalwart fighter for this state and this country, there are people that are sending in droves of money from all across the country. If he was just a quiet senator who voted with leadership all the time, and maybe he sometimes did some things that were kind of liberal, they would completely ignore him. Yeah,
John Cornyn. You don't hear about the John Cornyn re-election. Nobody talks about that. Christian's right. I mean, you look at the amount of money that's being spent right now. I saw a report yesterday that claims Colin Alid is spending 10 times as much on advertising as Ted Cruz is. And guess what? A lot of that money's coming from California and New York. Imagine that. Hey, Christian Collins is my guest right now. Follow him on Twitter. Quick break. We'll be right back. If you're watching us on social media, we're not going anywhere, so stick around.
According to a new report, exaggerated statements are up by like 1 billion%. And now more of the highest rated show on radio, Kenny Webster's Pursuit of Happiness.
To those of you watching us on social media, you're watching me and Christian record segments that will air later this afternoon on the radio here in Houston on our flagship station, KPRC 950, of course. But since this is a recording session, you don't have to wait while we play commercials. We'll start again in just a few seconds here. I'm just stopping the recording of the first segment and beginning another one. So we're about halfway through this right now. More with Christian Collins happening right now. Oh, and royalty-free music. That's the fun of social media, as I can't play. Normally we'd play like Alice in Chains or, something like that right now, but we can't because we're on social media. So you get to hear this royalty-free music. Hold on. All right, we're back. Today is National Take Your Parents to Lunch Day. Boy, that's got to be awkward for Hunter. His dad's not going to remember eating lunch with him. But at any rate, it is an exciting day. Take your parents to lunch day, or as Brad Pitt's kids call it, Second Mother's Day. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Great to be here with you. I'm Kenny Webster. I'm here with my buddy Christian Collins. I'm a big fan of Ted Cruz. To me, there are 3 good senators, maybe 4, right? Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz. And probably in that order is the order I'd put him in. Josh Hawley, I think, is a close 4th. I think he does a great job. Other than that, you can't count on most people in the Senate.
J.D. Vance, maybe, yeah.
Okay, no, you're right. I mean, I think of him as, you're right.
Yeah.
I think of him as the vice presidential candidate now.
Yeah.
But he's still a senator.
Right.
I will tell you this, Christian. Can we talk about that for a minute? I didn't dislike him, but I didn't love J.D. Vance right up until the moment I saw him debate Tim Walz, and then it all made sense to me. I'm a Liberty Republican. You know that. I come from the Ron Paul group. A lot of us have found a home in the America First movement. I don't entirely agree with all the economic policies. Sometimes when I hear J.D. Vance talk about corporate America, it sounds to me a little economically liberal to me. But when I heard him get up there on stage with Tim Walz, I did not hear a single thing I disagreed with. It was almost like being reintroduced to the guy. And I got to think a lot of Americans thought that. Did you see this article? I don't know if you saw this getting shared around. Apparently, a lot of gay liberal Democrats had a moment of like a red pill moment when they were watching J.D. Vance debate Tim Walz. Gay liberal Democrat men outspokenly decided they preferred J.D. Vance to Tim Walz. And it wasn't just like a he's more handsome thing. He made more sense to them policy-wise. Were you shocked? Did you know that? Did you hear about this?
He sounded great in the debate. I think he did a great job. And, when Don Jr. was at our Texas Youth Summit, the one thing he said was he spent 175% of his capital in working to get J.D. Vance elected. I saw this on his social media. I mean, he was being promoted by Don Jr. for months leading up to him being the nominee in July. So here's the thing that people may not realize, that Don Jr. has his dad's ear.
Yeah.
And if you can go a long way by being very close to Don Jr., and he has a lot of weight on what's happening in this country. And so, Don he has a great knack for finding good talent, and he picked a very good guy. And I think J.D. Vance, with his story, being able to reach middle America, he obviously is Ivy League. He's educated. He's served in the military. He's a business owner. He's been a great family man. For all of these reasons,
right.
And he's young and he can reach young voters. For all of these reasons, I think he's the perfect fit. And, his story, I don't know if you've seen Hillbilly Elegy.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I thought it was a great story.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Ron Howard, but I thought they did a good job on it. It's a little sad and depressing, but it has a happy ending. I mean, I guess that describes a lot of movies.
Right.
When you hear it's a movie about drug addiction in the Rust Belt, you know you're not going to go into it and get something real happy. But in the end, ultimately, it's a good story. Liberals are doing this thing to J.D. Vance where they think by pointing out how unaware they are of what Republicans actually believe, that they're pointing out how Republicans are hypocrites. I'll give you an example. I saw this tweet the other day I think it was from the Pod Saves America guy, or one of those people, one of these former Obama guys, was saying J.D. Vance and Donald Trump hate immigrants, and yet they're both married to one. It was like in one sentence, he didn't realize that he was pointing out that he just doesn't understand Republican policies. I mean, isn't that really what's happening there? Republicans don't have a problem with immigrants. Trump and J.D. Vance are both married to an immigrant.
No.
Their problem is illegal immigration. It seems obvious to me.
They want to make it about all immigrants, and they're trying to claim that Republicans are racist or white supremacists. That's how that's what they always do. That's all they got, really. I mean, it's the same old Saul Alinsky playbook. But the reality is, I mean, there are 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants in our country. And there's over 400,000 of them with criminal records. There's 16,000 that are rapists, and 13,000 that have been caught that are, they have a murder charge on their crime records. So,
right, that's huge.
This is according to the Department of Homeland Security. This is
Biden's Department of Homeland Security.
So we've got to do everything that we can to secure the border, and people that have come here legally. We should honor them. We need people that are good people that are going to contribute to making our country great. So people that have come here the right way, that have worked all of their lives to get here, that's what that Statue of Liberty is all about. It's supposed to be the land of opportunity, but we have to come through the front door, not the back door.
Isn't it more racist to try to draw a line between J.D. Vance's Ivy League educated wife and Trende Aragua? Like, that's what's racist, right? Look, they're all immigrants. No, it's not the same thing at all. It isn't even close to the same thing. This was a topic of discussion last night at the Ted Cruz, Colin Alid Texas Senator debate. And I watched the DNC just like I watched the RNC. I'm sure you probably took a look at both. Colin Alid gave a speech, and I had to see it when he spoke at the DNC. And he's listing off all the policies that his staff members agree that he supports. And one of them, he's like, yeah, we're going to do trans rights and IVF and abortion for women and all. And then he says, and secure the border. Christian, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. The people in the room at the DNC giant stadium full of Democrats, and secure the border, Colin Alid says. And everybody's, what? Secure the border? That's not what it's not what. Oh, in Texas. That's yeah. And last night they tried to make this point again. Here's the Democrat candidate for Texas senator trying to make you believe that he actually cares about border security, which is obviously laughable.
His entire answer, Congressman Alid, made zero reference to anything he's actually done in office. As Gromer Jeffers rightly noted in his question, Congressman Alid has said publicly, if you believe border security matters, he thinks you're a racist. He calls the border wall, quote, that racist border wall, and he has pledged to tear down that racist border wall personally. And he said, quote, we will not have that wall in this country. And by the way, that's been his consistent voting record. He's voted against the border wall not once, not twice, but 3 times. Every single time there's a serious measure in the House to secure the border, Colin Alid votes no. Look, it's a pattern we've seen actually at the presidential level, because it's what Kamala Harris does as well. And understand at home, Colin Alid is Kamala Harris. Their records are the same. I've served with both of them. They voted in favor of open borders over and over and over again, and now they are desperately trying to hide that from the voters. Now, at the end, Congressman Alid said, well, gosh, Cruz hasn't done anything on that. Well, let's talk about my record. When Donald Trump was president, I worked hand in hand with President Trump to secure the border, and we achieved incredible success. We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. That's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris inherited. It's what Colin Alid inherited. And they deliberately broke it and opened the border. And Texas is paying the price.
Senator, I don't understand how anybody could disagree with what Ted Cruz just said there. The numbers on this are indisputable. Look at the headlines today at BreitbartTexas.com. Trende Aragua gang member charged with prostituting, drugged, passed out migrants in Texas. Kamala's broken border. Special interest alien surge in Texas. New migrant caravan headed north trying to beat the possible arrival of a Trump administration. They're not worried about Kamala being president, are they, Christian Collins?
Absolutely not. And the border czar, where was she when allowing all of these people to come into our country? It's because of Harris's and Biden's policy of ending Remain in Mexico policy. I mean, they are just catching them and releasing them into our country instead of catching them and deporting them back to the country that they came from, right? So we have a situation in our country now that they caused because they stopped President Trump's policies via executive order. And, they're now claiming that they've tried to solve the problem that they created. I mean, we can look at the numbers and understand clearly that the numbers don't lie, that the illegal immigration problem was so much lower under President Trump, and now we have these large droves of illegal immigrants coming into our country. And as it relates to Colin Alid, Colin Alid is trying to sound like a moderate. He's trying to sound like he's bipartisan. He's trying to do this because he knows he's running in red Texas. Just like when Beto O'Rourke, he would claim that he owned a gun and that he shot guns, but when he ran in the Democrat primary 2 years later in the 2020 election for president, he said, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15. These politicians are smart. They'll say whatever they need to say to get elected. They'll talk to the the big oil people, and they'll say, well, no, we're not going to stop big oil. We're gonna make sure that we continue the policies that have made Texas prosper. They're going to say that they're not going to take away Texas's gun rights. They're going to say that they're going to secure the border because they know who they're talking to. And in reality, they're going to do just the opposite. We can look at the voting record just as Senator Cruz indicated to see exactly what he's going to do. He voted for 4 years in unison with Nancy Pelosi. By that, we understand exactly who he is. He's a radical leftist Democrat.
Yeah, I always thought one of the funniest moments for Democrats in Texas pretending to be moderates, before Beto was Wendy. Wendy ran and lost against Abbott, I think, right? And then after she lost, she came out and she said, all right, I told everybody I was for the Second Amendment when I was running for office. I'm actually not. And I almost admired her for admitting this out loud. Like, you're admitting out loud that you lied to us. Yeah, I did, but I almost got arrested I almost got elected. And then when she ran against Chip Roy, obviously that was the only thing anybody could talk about. Yeah, but you've admitted that you're a liar. It was like when Fauci told us, don't wear masks. No, wear masks. And then he came out again later on. He's like,
that impression was good.
Thank you very much. If Fauci and Bernie, it's like the same voice. So it's hard when I'm doing Bernie. With Bernie, you just go down an octave. Like, have you ever noticed how all Beatles impersonations are the same? But Ringo is the low pitch, Paul's in the middle, and then John's kind of high. Like, yeah, we're the Beatles. We're the Beatles. Yes, we're the Beatles. It's the same voice. You just switch octaves. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there. But my favorite moment, Christian, from last night's debate was this right here. Ted had the perfect answer. When Colin Alid came at him with the very predictable talking point about January 6th and Ted being a threat to democracy, he brought up the SAVE Act.
And it's not funny, because you're a threat to democracy.
Sure.
I was on the House floor when we went through the votes. I remember when you objected to the results in Arizona.
Now, let me be clear. I don't know Congressman Alid. I have no animus for him personally.
Nice.
But I do know his voting record. His voting record is radical and extreme. And you want to talk about threats to democracy? Let's take a vote that just happened a few weeks ago on the floor of the House, the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act provided that in order to register to vote, you got to prove you're an American citizen. Congressman Alid voted no. 11.5 million illegal immigrants have come into this country under Kamala Harris and Colin Alid's open border policies, and Congressman Alid votes no to protecting our elections and ensuring that people don't vote illegally. That is a threat to democracy.
Dude, I mean, is that not the perfect answer or what? Christian, this is so basic. It's called the SAVE Act, right? We don't want non-citizens to vote. How could you be against that?
The only way that you could be against that is if you want illegal immigrants to vote. I mean, it's obvious. And they want to give them a pathway to citizenship, and they don't even want in California to act. They're not even allowed to check voter IDs. You're not even allowed to ask for it. It's a crime if you ask for it now. So, in other words, they want illegal immigration to happen because they want to import voters, and if there's enough illegal immigrants that are shipped off to every single swing state, 6 or 7 swing states, there will never be another Republican election where we win again. I mean, There will never be another Republican president, and they will accomplish all of their goals. So their goal here is very clear. They know exactly why they're doing this. They're just not expressing that, and they don't want to disenfranchise, union workers and people like in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania that they need to vote for them.
That's it. Christian, I could talk to my buddy Christian Collins all day, but we got to run, unfortunately. We're up against the clock here. If you're not following Christian on social media, do it. He's on Facebook. He's on Instagram. He's on Twitter. A lot of great content there. Check out the Texas Youth Summit. They have a website. If you are trying to find like-minded people in and around Southeast Texas, they can help you find adults, college kids, whatever the group may be. And to the rest of you, I say have an awesome afternoon. I pray for all of you. I love you all. Get back here bright and early tomorrow morning for more of what you bought a radio for. Have a great day.
You are listening to the Pursuit of Happiness Radio. Tell the government to kiss your ass when you listen to this show.
Hey, you're still watching us? We're still talking. We just finished recording, but Christian and I realized we've got a little time here before we got to run. So this is bonus content. This will not be heard on the radio today. If you're watching us on social media, you don't have to change the channel. We're going to keep talking right now. I noticed we had a couple of trolls. Somebody that didn't like Ted Cruz on Facebook was leaving comments in the comment section. It's like, all right, you don't like Ted, big deal. We do like him, so cry more. But, all that being said, this election will come and go. There will be more elections. And one of the things that we were talking about off air, do you think, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Christian, if John Cornyn comes up for election, eventually, if he's going to have to run for office again, do you think he runs again knowing full well that Ken Paxton, our attorney general, might be coming for him?
I think that's an interesting question. And he's, of course, running for majority leader, and if he doesn't get that, which right now that's in question, I think there's another John Thune, right? He's a senator. Yeah, that can maybe build a bigger support group of senators to support him for his candidacy for that position. And if Cornyn doesn't get it, and I think if Trump wins, I think the climate for John Cornyn will be very, very rough. Yeah, and the question will be, what does a then President-elect Trump do with Ken Paxton? I mean, I think Ken Paxton would be a great AG of the United States.
I think everybody knows that. I think if Trump gets elected, we already know these two guys are buddies. I think if Trump gets elected, Ken Paxton is his attorney general.
Right.
Because think about it. If Trump gets elected, there's term limits. There's not going to be another Trump elect after that. This is it. Yeah. I think Trump will be able to do some things he might not be, very bold things that he might not have been able to do in his first term. Most people didn't like Jeff Sessions that much as an attorney general. I think a lot of MAGA guys, I think a lot of America First people would like Ken Paxton. The thing is, if Ken Paxton becomes the AG, that would mean he wouldn't be running against John Cornyn for Senate. So then who does?
Ronnie Jackson is probably the person closest with President Trump to get that Trump endorsement. Of course, he was his doctor, and they're very close in that way.
That's
Ronnie
right.
Jackson is always at Mar-a-Lago. He's always talking there to President Trump. And so I think Ronnie Jackson might be the person that would run against John Cornyn. Now, if John Cornyn decides not to run, then that is an open primary, and there's 10 people running for that position. It could be anybody. I mean, it could, but there's lanes, right? I mean, there's the America First lane, which is a very it's what the old Tea Party movement was, and it's the America First lane.
That's right.
And then you have more of a corporate establishment lane, and the question is who runs in that lane.
And I know most people won't admit this out loud, but the America First movement is Ron Paul Republicans and Ross Perot Republicans. That's who it is. Ironically, all grassroots stuff that started in Texas. And I agree with your point there. Do you think Dan Crenshaw runs for Senate? I don't see him winning a statewide race ever.
Well, I know he probably wants to, but I think he's in tough position with the grassroots. I think there's a lot of people who are upset with him. If you look at his last election, I mean, he got 57%. It was a very rough race for him. And maybe he says he wasn't trying. A lot of people close to him say he wasn't trying, but that was definitely a referendum on him. And I think it'll be interesting to see if he were to try to run statewide, what would happen. I think it depends on who his opponents are. But I mean, Dan Crenshaw he's more of a middle of the road centrist Republican.
I think that's a very nice way of explaining his platform positions, Christian. I think you're being very diplomatic right now. But I would say he's a liberal Republican is what I would say he is. A neocon would be another word for that. All the neocons that used to run the party, the Dick Cheneys, and they've all become Kamala Harris supporters now. I think the only thing preventing George W. Bush from endorsing Kamala Harris is the fact that he doesn't want to screw over his nephew, George P. Bush. George P. Bush clearly still has political ambitions in the state of Texas. If George W. Bush comes out as a Democrat, George P. Bush can never be in Texas Republican Party anymore. But I don't think Texas Democrats would elect George P. Bush, so it's not like he could switch parties. Dan Crenshaw would probably love to be a senator. I don't think he could win a statewide election.
He wants to be president. I mean, Dan Crenshaw wants to be president. So, I mean, I think that's very clear. So, I think their goal, their hope, a lot of these people won't say this explicitly. I mean, they have to say what they need to say right now, like, go Trump, we got to win this, go Republican, team Republican. And the ones that are, I mean, these people, they do hate Trump.
They hate him.
They hate Trump.
Yeah,
and
the Bushes especially. Dan Crenshaw probably. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but I know a lot of these people hate Trump, and I think when it comes to the future of Texas, I think they actually hope that he loses.
I think Dan Crenshaw wants Trump to lose. I think so too.
Because then they feel like they have a mandate to reorient the party away from this populist bent and back to this like Paul Ryan, back to this. The people that he fundraises with, Karl Rove, Rick Perry's kind of in that crowd, right?
Paul Ryan and Rick Perry were basically neocons that were pretending to be liberty Republicans, and they did a good job of pretending to be it. But to your point about Dan Crenshaw wanting to be president,
and Rick Perry tries to work with both sides to his credit. I think
I don't dislike him as much as the others, but the Dan Crenshaw for president thing's weird to me, Christian. Because can we really have a president that's that short? I mean, he's like 4'10", right?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I'll comment on his his height, but
I think that's very tasteful of you. I could do it. I'm a morning radio show host.
But I think
because you're like what, 6 feet tall, right? Dan Crenshaw probably comes up to your nipples. I mean, he's not. That wouldn't. He's a little guy compared. Would you ever run against a Dan Crenshaw? Would you ever do that?
Well, look, I definitely have it in my heart to do what God has for me in the future, and whatever that would mean. And so I think it's important to understand that, look, political climates change, but I definitely have it in my heart to run for office again at some point, someday. I don't know when that'll be.
Or what it would be.
But the reality is, what I believe that we need in this country is people that are America First, that will support the America First movement, that support President Trump, that are understanding and listening to the grassroots, that do not forget where they came from, that recognize that it's a privilege to be elected. It's not a power base that you assume and use it as a stepping stone to get something else. But it's a privilege to be elected to represent the people of your district. And there's in his district and in all of the congressional districts, there's around 800,000 people. You got to represent.
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
You got to spend time in your district. You got to represent those people well. It's not just doing, Fox News and just campaigning off of that and hoping that you're getting into higher office eventually. I mean, you got to focus on the people of your district. And I think if you look at his district, there's a lot of people that are upset with him. So,
boy, you're not kidding. Let's look at his district for just a second. I've got the map here of District 2 up on the screen. This is not necessarily where the liberals live. Kingwood, probably the most conservative part of Houston right here. You're getting up into the Conroe area, just barely into Conroe. This is, besides Dan Crenshaw, the Woodlands, I've got to think the most prominent conservative activist public figure in this part of the country, besides Dan Crenshaw, would probably be you. This is not a place where a lot of left-leaning people live. And, you said you wanted to do what God wants you to do. I would assume God probably doesn't want the lawmaker from the Texas 2nd Congressional District to be a war hawk, Christian.
Well, I'm paying attention to what people are saying. I'm definitely paying attention. And if you look at, what Tucker Carlson said, I mean, I don't know if you saw the tweet where he once said, John Cornyn and Dan Crenshaw should be bagging groceries at Walmart, And it was interesting. Like I went to, I didn't know he was going to do this. I went to Tucker Carlson's event the other day.
Jesse
in
Kelly, that was a great event.
Yeah, I mean, and it was. I mean, it's just I don't know how it happened this way, but I mean, it was just interesting because you're in the crowd, right? And he says, "Well, there's a terrible member of Congress from this area. I'm not going to say who." And then everybody's yelling.
Yeah, they know
a particular name. And then he goes, "Okay, fine, it's Dan Crenshaw." And I don't know how this guy, I really don't know how. I do know, but I don't know how this guy that was on Saturday Night Live, and was heralded as this hero, got to this point where, you have all of these radio hosts, big ones like yourself and Michael Berry.
We wanted Crenshaw early on. We liked him.
But now that don't want him there, and Mattress Mac doesn't want him there, and all of these people that are leaders in our community that don't want him there.
Yeah.
And then you have, national talking heads like, I mean, the biggest thought leader in our movement is Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's kind of taking the place, from Rush Limbaugh.
I think so too.
And he's saying it. And so it's just, it's really interesting to see how the mighty have fallen. And I think, look, I don't want to run against Dan. I'm just saying, I hope Dan, I pray that, he will be someone that will get back to, representing the people of his district, that he would lead well. I pray for all of our leaders, Republican and Democrat, and I have no animus. I don't want to have any animus toward anyone. I'm just saying.
I love that.
I hope that he gets back to what he's supposed to be.
And then there wouldn't be a need to run against him. I like that too. Speaking of, Tucker Carlson, they say now has the biggest podcast on earth. And, as a regional talk show host and podcaster, I'm pretty proud of our audience. We can get thousands of people today to listen, but he's getting millions. Almost as big. What was the biggest podcast until Tucker took the crown was Joe Rogan. Yeah. And now apparently Kamala Harris wants to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. That's got to be a sign that she's suffering right now. 4 years ago, didn't they all tell us that he was feeding horse paste to people and poisoning them with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? How could that be the audience she wants?
That would be really interesting. And what kind of interview would that be like? Would Joe Rogan actually give hardball questions?
How could he not? It's Joe Rogan.
I hope so. I hope he does. I hope he treats her just like every one of his other guests. But the question would be, like, why would she want to go? I mean, she wasn't doing any interviews. But I mean, like, up until the point of our Texas Youth Summit, for example, there were as many interviews done by her since she had run for president as there were assassination attempts on President Trump.
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
It's crazy, right?
That's crazy. And so for her to want to go on a long-form interview and talk for 3 hours, 4 hours.
That's what it is. There's no short episode.
Yeah, with Joe Rogan would be really interesting. And I don't think he would do any editing like her 60 Minutes interview. They totally,
they do it live.
That and remade that. It still sucked, but so what would that interview look like? Would be my question. I would love to. We've all wanted to see President Trump on the Joe Rogan show, and I think the only way that Joe Rogan does it is if he has Kamala on there too, and kind of looks like a neutral bidder, and he's just having them both on, like a referee, and rather than like a supporter like Elon Musk and all these others.
I totally agree, because to me it seems obvious to have Trump on, because Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., that's, Joe Rogan and RFK Jr. aren't that far away from Trump. Kamala is. Kamala is far away from all three of them. But anyway, hey, we're running out of time here. I'm Kenny Webster. I want to thank Christian Collins. Follow him on social media if he runs for office, and I personally think that he should consider it next time around. Hopefully he'll make the announcement on this radio show, or at least come on here and talk about it. But if you follow him on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else, that's the best way to get a hold of him. To the rest of you, I love you all. Have an awesome day. Don't forget, Thursday night, we are going to be at, what's it called? Wicklow Heights, which is if you're from Houston, that's in the Heights. It's at, what's the address here, is 1027 West 19th Street from 5 to 7 p.m. I'm going to be there with a bunch of female Republican judicial candidates trying to take over the Court of Appeals right now. There are a bunch of radical Marxists who've taken it away from us. So hopefully, we're trying to save Southeast Texas, which just coincidentally is a movement that we got started at the Texas Youth Summit a little back in the summertime with Cindy Siegel, the head of the Harris County GOP. I love